Woo-hoo-hoo. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Millennial Sales Podcast. This is your host, Tommy Tahoe Lemo. This is episode 217. Happy Wednesday morning. Let's get it cracking. Before we get into today's great guest, I want to give a shout out to the two sponsors of our show. First one is Gong.io. I love Gong so much that I went to work there. That's where I'm working right now as an AE. In short, it's irresponsible to be a revenue leader and not have Gong. It is the revenue intelligence platform. It is the best invention for salespeople since Salesforce. It helps you to, coach your reps better. It helps you to drive more deals, helps you to understand your market. It can be as little as call recording, and it can be as great as, the thing that's driving your entire sales team forward. So give Gong a look, gong.io, or just message me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to connect you to the right person if you're interested in checking them out. The other sponsor to the podcast is postal.io. Postal helps you to, create better relationships with your customers, right? So in a world where everyone's trying to scale and automate things, sending gifts to customers and partners and prospects, Postal does it in a very unique way that they can give you access to, the brewery across town, or flowers from the florist that are on the corner of where you live, and really try to create these very special experiences, these personalized experiences for your customers. So they're doing something that's really cool. Anyone that goes to Apple and takes the 40 seconds to review the show, 5 stars, and then you just message me on LinkedIn, let me know that you sent the review, I will give you a free Starbucks card on Postal. So it's a pretty win-win effort here. Win-win-win, really. It takes you a minute, helps me out, and helps them out to give them exposure. And then you ultimately win by getting some, free coffee or a tea or a scone or whatever you're into. So do me a favor, support our sponsors, Gong and Postal. That's how you can help me out. All right, let's pivot into today's episode. I've got a conversation with Christopher Williams. Christopher is the founder of Sales Huddle. Sales Huddle is a peer-to-peer virtual mastermind group for top salespeople that get regular actionable advice and feedback on specific sales challenges that they're facing. So it's, peer-to-peer group, 5 people all in a room talking about very intimate things, probably not talking about open rates and, what the best opening line is for a cold call, but they get a lot deeper than that into the psychology, into the emotional side, and all of the different things that go on in a salesperson's life outside of just those metrics. So I'm really interested in what Chris is doing for the sales community. He talks all about the journey and what he's into now in this episode. So I won't, reveal any of the secrets. Let's instead just get straight into my episode with Christopher Williams. Let's go. All right, Chris Williams, good morning, man. Welcome to Millennial Sales.
Hey, Tom, good morning.
How we doing out in, you're in New York, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in Kingston, New York.
Where is that, upstate? I've never heard of Kingston before.
Kingston is 2 hours north of New York City on the Hudson.
Okay, nice. So probably some good nature out there, or what?
Yeah, we're at the foothills of the Catskills, so on the southeast corner. Kingston's I would call it a rural city. There's 30,000 people.
Yeah.
So but it's not anything close to New York or San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, I saw that you grew up in Maine. I'm a Massachusetts guy myself, born and raised. So, and a Babson guy too. Or I'm not.
You went to Babson?
No. I didn't, but I tried to go. I didn't get in, but I just saw you were. We both went to New England schools.
Beautiful. Where'd you go?
I went to Stonehill College,
Mm-hmm.
which is a small school in Mass.
Yep. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. I'd love to hear how the Maine upbringing, it sounds like, just from reading your LinkedIn bio, that had an effect on you, in just in terms of, like, I think you called it, what was it, like ambitious hippies or disciplined hippies or something like that kind of caught my eye of just like the way you grew up and the people that you were around growing up.
Yeah, I mean, Maine is a very salt of the earth state. Some of the smartest and most capable people I know are from Maine, people that can build houses, fix tractors, code apps. Maine is a very industrious place. So I grew up around people that were always learning. And Maine is everyone in Maine is kind of hustling, is making money in many ways. And yeah, I think a lot of it is also because Maine is pretty isolated and it's rural. It's not very monetarily, it's not very wealthy.
Yeah.
You know, like I would drive to Massachusetts to visit my Nana when I was growing up, and all of a sudden it was like all the lawns were mowed and all the cars were really new. And I was like, wow, I'm used to seeing like beat up Honda Civics on the roads.
Yeah.
And so I've been working, and I grew up poor, and I've been working since I was 12 years old. And yeah, the hippie part was a lot of my best friends' parents were self-described hippies. And there's a feeling when I was growing up that sales was evil and manipulative and lying by design. Like there wasn't a way to not do it in that manner. And so that's when I was growing up, I was very into, saving the world and how I understood it at that time, which for me meant a lot of renewable energy. And it still does. And I loved business. And I also had this thing that sales was evil, that sales was coercive, that sales was lying, that sales was manipulative.
Why
Yeah.
is that, do you think?
It's not based on any objective data. Now, when I look at sales, I think the whole perspective of that it's manipulative is actually, if we were to define manipulative as lying or withholding the truth, that's probably the single scenario where it is manipulative. And I've heard of that happening in organizations where like there's a bunch of salespeople and the managers just like literally might not tell them the truth.
Yeah.
In which case they are not consciously lying to their customers, but it's happening indirectly. But when people bring it up like, oh, is it manipulative? If it's a consumer, I'll say, well, name me the last 5 things that you purchased, and they'll name it. I say, great. And which one were you manipulated into buying? And they're like, no, none of them. I was like, great. So what I hear you saying is you're perfect and everybody out there is the sucker that's getting manipulated. And they're like, oh no. And I was like, well, my position is that every person kind of knows what's best for them and is a very capable human being. So the interesting thing, and this is even more true with B2B sales, when people are like, oh, it's like, really, you think a company's spending $250,000 on a contract a year and they can't make a decision for themselves? That's what like, right? So there's this embedded judgment within sales as manipulative of either or both of one of two things. One, the salesperson has this superhuman ability to distort the truth. The buyer is like incapable, incompetent, can't make good decisions for themselves, or both. When I actually think the opposite is true. I think they're both equal and very competent, and the room for manipulation is actually not really there. Again, it can happen from withholding the truth, but that will get found out pretty easily.
Yeah, I guess it would be, I think a different word would probably be persuasion, right? Like if you talk about something that you might purchase, right? You might purchase a box of cereal that, you buy it because of the animal that's on the box and the brightly colored packaging. But if you wanted to, you could look on the other side of the box and see the ingredients and say, I might not want all of that, what color, green 72 or whatever's in the Fruit Loops. Similarly, like you could, in order to buy B2B, I think intelligently, like you have to do your own homework. And that's why there's sites like G2 that exist. That's why there's analyst reports. It's why there's peer-to-peer networks that you can ask folks, hey, has anyone bought XYZ before? What's your experience like? Things like that. So I think there's things that salespeople do to persuade. That's part of the job. But to do so in a moral fashion, right? I feel like there's that fine line of, Am I doing this to help them, or am I doing this to, despite them? Like, am I doing this because it's in my best interest, but it's not in their best interest?
Bingo. And I think that's the key distinction is this information used to serve another person or to serve myself? Because sales ultimately is a place of people buy things from people that they trust more than themselves. That right there it can categorize all of sales. So when the question is asked, will AI take over salespeople? The answer is yes, in as much as a person will trust a computer more than themselves or another person. That will happen. And if in the cases where that is true, that will happen. In the cases where that's not true, it won't happen. It also answers the question, well, why do I not need a salesperson to buy a toothbrush? Well, I trust myself fully to make that decision for myself. Thus, I do not need the assistance of another person.
Yep.
So then the question becomes, well, how and when and why will one person trust another person more than themselves to get to the place that they want to go? And that's a function of competence and a function of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the question becomes, well, why is it hard for a 23-year-old to cold call a CEO that's 45? Under what situations is that hard, and under what situations is that easy? And the question is in which categories might that competence be obvious to the 45-year-old or not? Right. So there's a set of skills. The classic would be social media. The 23-year-old is literally better at the 45-year-old person.
Yep.
Than the 40. And the 45-year-old person is aware of this difference. And the 45-year-old person wants to be good in that area. And that would explain the competence. And then there's trust there, right? The person who is doing the selling is honest, has integrity, is trustworthy, and so I think that's the, yeah, like those are I'm trying to tie this back to what we were talking about, like the difference between manipulating and persuasion, but those are the elements that I see are the most important, is that it's built around competence, and it's built around trust. And that point is like, can be missed. And I want to tie this back to your original question. Why was there this judgment around sales as being evil and manipulative? And I think it was because those folks had they probably never had an experience with a buying situation. It's kind of that thing of like, when they were probably sold to really well, they didn't consider it to be sales.
Yep.
Right? They might not have been aware that was what was actually happening, but when it didn't go really well, or when it felt like they were lied to, or when felt like they were promised one thing and another thing happened, they were like, oh, that's sales. See, that's kind of bad. So it's kind of one of those things of like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
So that's how I tie it back to your original question. And I feel like you're going to ask something around the competence and the trust part.
Well, a point that I wanted to make, because you mentioned the 23-year-old cold calling the 45-year-old. Like, I think I agree with you. I think in order for that to work, that 23-year-old and I've been that 23-year-old calling 45-year-olds. And I'm currently the 27-year-old calling the 45-year-olds, right? So there's not a huge difference there in terms of the age gap. But in order to make that successful, you have to show competence. And another way to do that, it doesn't have to be that you have a skill that they don't have, but if you can shed light on something that they don't know about, right? So where I'm going with that is, like, you have to be really educated in what you're selling and in that market, right? Like, if you're just calling and you have a script and your boss tells you to say these things, that will get you some meetings, that will generate a few conversations. But until you truly get it, whatever it is, if you get why that company might get hacked if you're selling security solutions, why you need to, in my case, shed the light on revenue intelligence with Gong, why you need to talk about sales community with Sales Huddle. Like, until you can shed light on what that issue might be for that person and help educate them on that, I don't think that you have any sort of leverage with that person. I don't think you have any sort of trust built until you can help educate them on something.
Yeah, 100%. And there can be a one-step sales process where the person actively knows they have a problem and they're looking for something. Those are always easier. And then there's a two-step sales process where they're not aware of the situation, and that situation has to be found. They need to be made aware of it and believe it exists. And then they need to select whoever the salesperson is as the right vendor, right? So a two-step sales process is always harder than a one-step sales process where they're aware of the issue, they're actively searching for it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that going back to this thing of competency and trust, I think that this is also where I notice the hard part of establishing those things around honesty with oneself is that I found it in my life to be really useful of really being clear with myself around where I don't have competence, where I'm not trustworthy, right? Like, also fundamentally at the end of the day, when someone makes a sale, particularly a B2B sale, it's important to realize what's happening here. Like, they're putting their neck on the line to trust initially another salesperson, but there's also kind of they're trusting like the organization behind it. They're putting their neck and their job on the line to make that happen. Like, that's the level of trust that we're talking. So sometimes when a sale is not going through, I might be talking to someone. I might say, "Are you a trustworthy person?" And then maybe like, "What do you mean? What are you saying?" And I'm like, "I'm saying just what I'm saying. Are you a trustworthy person?" And they're like, "Well, I don't know." And my response is, "I hear you. My advice to you would be to figure that out. How would you know? How would you know?" And start to address those things.
How would you know?
Tom, how would you know?
I would ask other people, because I don't think it's my decision to say if I'm trustworthy, right? I trust myself. So I guess that, there could be two lenses on that, whether you trust yourself, but the question is whether someone else can trust you and does trust you. So you go to other people, probably it's more comfortable to start with people that you're close to, but you could probably expand that to other customers, people you work with, people in your network, things like that.
Yeah. I love your answer, and I agree. I mean, I can have a bunch of characteristics, and I'll name like how I think about it. And at the end of the day, completely trust is something that's it's based on someone else's experience of me, not my own belief about myself. But for me, what I do when I'm trustworthy is I listen really well. So I would go to other people and I say, when you talk to me, do you feel heard? Right? I say what I mean and I mean what I say. Those things are in alignment, right? I'm like, I only say things that I believe in, and I do what I say I'm going to do. Do I have integrity? Do I do what I say I'm going to do? And I'm not perfect in this at this point in my life too, but I'm 99% there, right? Do I take responsibility and accountability for the things that I do and the impacts that has on people, intended or unintended? When here's, I think, a useful one, even within sales organizations. Do I support other people in what they think is true? So the number one, and here's typically how I notice that when someone says something, does someone feel supported and accepted to say something to me that they know or think that I disagree with? Because if they don't, they won't say it because they're worried of kind of repercussions. So that I've seen that play out in both how I might deal with a customer, and a customer doesn't feel okay saying something that they think I disagree with, and I see it happen within sales organizations. So here's how I notice it within a sales organization. Go to a bunch of salespeople and say, "Hey, do you think your boss will not accept, the best would be reward you for sharing something that you would like to do or something that you think is that they disagree with?" That's listening. That's support. Now, because they listen to it doesn't mean they have to do it. Doesn't mean they have to agree. Doesn't mean they have to do. But at least there's a level of listening that the truth can come out.
Hmm.
And in situations where said managers, the people around them, below them, do not feel supported in saying things where there's disagreement, you know what happens? Honesty stifles. And then when honesty stifles, like production and all these things, like the truth can't come out. So I think that's the hard part of like in my journey, and as I work with other people, is the hard part of answering the question, like, am I trustworthy? Is a lot of those has to do with like understanding when I'm not trustworthy and being really honest about when am I out of integrity? When am I withholding the truth? When am I telling an outright lie? When am I saying something that I don't believe in?
Hmm.
Because then if I can know what that feels like and I can know when I'm doing that and be honest with myself and I can stop doing those things, then all of a sudden I start to know that I'm being honest because I know that I'm not being dishonest. I know that I'm in integrity because I'm not out of integrity, right? It becomes this opposite circumstance. And I was on a sales huddle right before this call where I was with a person who was changing jobs, and they're in a sales huddle and they're withholding the truth from existing customers. And they're like, what should I do about it? I should do that. And I was like, tell the truth. Why are you withholding? They're going to find out about it again eventually, right? And I get it, man. I've withheld the truth before. I've ruined relationships with business partners and customers before, like 100%. And I think that can be a hard thing where at the upper echelon of sales, it becomes less about the specific tactics and the specific strategies, why those things are important. It's more of like, am I a trustworthy person? Am I acting from a place of true competence where I'm calling somebody up and here's the other thing with competence. I know where I'm competent in an area because I know where I'm incompetent in an area. And I'm honest with myself and others about, I can help you in this area and I can't help you in this area. It's not like I don't tell everyone that I can help them because I want to help everybody and get paid. It's like, nope, these areas I'm not competent in. That's not my lane. This is my lane. You're this person with this problem. I can help you. And that confidence will shine through to another person. It's in fact impossible for it to not come through.
So you strike me as a very mindful dude, and someone that does a lot of self-reflecting, right? This knowledge of self that you're talking about doesn't come just like while you're walking the dog, in the morning, and just like it doesn't just come to you. Like from my experience and from people I've talked to, comes from a lot of deep discovery work with yourself. So I'd love if that's true for you. I'd love to hear you talk about what that process has been like. If there's books that have helped shape that, if there's exercises you do mentally for that, like I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Things shifted in my life around like 2 years ago where two things happened simultaneously. A business I had started with business partners just blew up, and had my heart broken in a relationship. And I reached this point where it was like, I can't do this by myself anymore. Like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And it's not getting me what I want. And I know there's a solution out there, but I don't know what it is. Like I had to ask for help. So for me, that was kind of the thing that shifted it. And it's more about, experiential learning and doing things in connection with other people. And it wasn't about knowing the answer, right? So there's a difference between knowing something and being something and acting from that place. Like I'll give you an example. We could just say listening. There's so many books and things written about listening, and all those things are great. But does that mean that because someone knows it in their head, that they know the feeling of what it feels like to listen to somebody fully, as if they're an empty vessel when listening, and the other person feels absolutely heard and understood? That comes from a place of doing and experiencing that, not knowing it, not knowing how to do it or knowing that it should be done. That comes from a place of of being that way, of listening in that way. So that's what kind of shifted for me on a personal level. And then I just started to notice that all those things affected sales, where like all of these things are related, have nothing to do with sales, and completely impact sales. Like listening has nothing inherently to do with sales. It has to do with being a human. And any effect on improved listening will affect a person who sells at the same time. So yeah, for me, it was like a personal thing of like having my like heart broken, like being in a bunch of pain, having a business partnership that just went to crap because and really looking out and asking other people, like, here's what I am, here's what I want to be. I don't know what to do. And just following that and having people help me. That was kind of a big thing that shifted things. And I would say, yeah, the other thing there's a book on this and I haven't read it. I think it's by Daniel Pink of like To Sell is to Be Human. Mm-hmm. I've not read it, but I even the title by itself just tells it to me, because to me, sales is such a human pursuit. Like it's such that anything that affects how I am will show up in how I sell. I can't really separate those two things.
Yep.
And yeah, and so once that started to click for me, and I started to see how these shifts in my life was affecting how I was interacting with people in a business context, that's when I started to connect them. And how, again, like very simple things would affect sales. And I'll give you examples of simple things. Is salespeople asking for what they want. Hey Joe, we've been talking for half an hour. I understand these things about you. I think it'd be a great fit. I think I can help you out. I'd like you to buy this. Would you? Like I've listened to a lot of sales calls where the sale doesn't happen because the salesperson doesn't say what they want. Now
they kind of skid around it.
They kind of skid around it. Now here's the bit. That is showing up in the rest of their life. It's not as if they're just interacting in the sales way. I guarantee you, and I'm saying this from personal experience, and then I talk with a lot of people very candidly in Sales Huddle. It's not as if they're dealing with their friends and their partners and their parents in a more direct way in the rest of their life. And then when they put on their sales hat, they can't say what they want. So yeah, so that's kind of just where I see the overlap. And it comes down to, I think, a lot of really little simple things like listening, saying no, being forthright and saying what a salesperson wants when they're booking a meeting, at the start of the meeting, at the end of the meeting. Yeah. Like just
it's
those
so
things.
True. Your example is something that I've definitely struggled with because I'm a people pleaser, right? I don't want to let people down, whether it's a prospect, whether it's a coworker, whether it's, a family member, a friend, like, I don't want to be disliked and I don't want to, let people down in any way. Right. So sometimes that hinders you from saying, from making the bold request, from for asking for what you want or speaking what's truly on your mind. Oh, I'll let this one pass. Oh, it didn't feel good to push on that call. I'll go on the next one, and so that's something that I've worked on. And it's so true. I mean, like the way that you are is definitely the way that you sell. And I think that's one example. And there's a million others. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, you've referenced the Sales Huddle a few times. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit and expound on what you're building there and what that community is.
Yeah, sure. Sales Huddle is It's a really simple thing. And what I fell into doing Sales Huddle by listening to salespeople and making a space that I wish that I had. So what sales to me is something that it can be lonely. We get a lot of no's. It's something that's individual, but also is best done as a team sport, right? There's something about the camaraderie of sales, which is like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? How would I say this? Like, what have you learned? And what I think that Sales Huddle is tapping into is that a lot of salespeople don't have a lot of support out there, like a place to go where the truth can come out, like the real truth. And people can ask questions, sometimes difficult questions that can get to the real truth. Because once that root situation is identified, the answer oftentimes becomes kind of obvious. And how I fell into Sales Huddle was I've been in sales for 14 years, and for a number of years, like people would just come to me that would want help solving sales problems. Revenue problems is actually what they wanted help, is because sometimes it was a product issue. It had nothing to do with sales, right? They literally they had the wrong product for the wrong audience. That's like a nuance that you appreciate and people on this podcast will appreciate, but is missed by others. And so I started working with people one-on-one. And I don't see myself as a coach. I don't see myself as a consultant, but I started doing it because I was resisting it for a long time. And what I realized once, and the goal of Sales Huddle was initially going to kind of feed that, right? Like, oh, like let's do this free thing, and then I can work with people one-on-one. And what finally hit me when people were coming to Sales Huddle and they kept on coming back is that what people really needed was like a place where they could be honest, a place where they could feel camaraderie, and to get an outside perspective, just to get a second set of eyes of like, what do you think? And what finally hit me was that people were paying me not because I'm a great coach or a great consultant, because I'm not. I would call myself a competent salesperson. I would call myself a competent coach, right? I listen well and I ask simple questions and people come to their own conclusions is kind of how I do things. And what I realized was happening with the Sales Huddle was someone shows up to a huddle, there's 4 other people that each has 15 years of experience, let's say, and there's 60 years of experience trying to help someone with a solution that's exactly the situation that they're dealing with, right? So it's a lot of experience and a lot of perspective and 100% presence. And that was kind of the thing that finally hit me, which was happening. And then when I actually tried to understand why it was being so useful, that's kind of the thing that I finally noticed of what was happening. And so that's what it is. It's a place for salespeople to come get together, where they can be really honest. Everyone's showing up because they want to. There's no one's boss is making them do it. There's no company politics. There's no bosses. The feedback is coming from a truly honest place to like help each other get better at our craft. Because I think that that's the other thing with sales is something that it's a practice. It's impossible to be perfect at it.
Yep.
Every sales call I still make is not perfect. Like I look back and I'm like, man, I missed that. And what if I said this? And like, it just requires like a consistent grind. And yeah, it's just really special. There's a level of candor that can happen in Sales Huddle that is really cool when everyone's showing up and wanting to get better. And I could go on examples for days. Like I'll give you one example that's an interesting one. Someone came into a huddle and they were talking about email cadence, this and that, and I'm listening to them. And I just had this little spidey sense. It's like, I don't think they believe anything that they're saying. I don't know where this came from, but this is the thought. So they get done with their work statement, which is what they're asking for help with. And I raise my hand and they call up and they say, Chris, and I says, do you believe what you're saying? And they said, what do you mean? I said, do you believe it? And they said, I don't know. And I said, okay. And they say, well, what's your advice for that? I said, don't say anything you don't believe. Silence in the Sales Huddle. There's 4 other people. And they say, well, how would I do that? I said, Stop saying, and like, start from a blank sheet of paper, say nothing that you don't believe. And they were like, huh. And they're like, so like where, you know, I was like, you don't believe something, you don't know if something's true within your company? Go find the answer. Write it down. Ask yourself, do you believe this?
Powerful.
And that was the bit. And it was like, oh, like it doesn't have anything to do with the email cadence. You're saying things that you don't believe in, and other people's bullshit meter is going off. Now, the other people might not even know why their bullshit meter is going off. This is where the crazy thing happens. But they know. You've probably had experiences where you just listen to someone and you're like, I don't trust that person.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
But I've also been the person that I have sold things on the spectrum of, I believe this is, you know, the best thing since sliced bread versus, you know, this is, you know, stale, crusty bread, like, and all in the middle. And like, the more success, the more fulfillment, the more money, the better time always comes on the end where you truly believe that what you're selling is the best thing for that person.
Yes.
And you see the value and you believe it. And you believe, like, you know, the slide that says we're the best, because every company has that we're the best slide in one way or another. And you have to believe those things, or you don't say that, or you have to believe the way that you're pitching, or you don't say it. You know, you have to believe that this is worth 10,000, 1,000, $500,000, or, you know, other people are going to see right through that. And so I completely agree with you.
And it's like, from that place of belief, then comes, well, how do I communicate from a place of that truth, whatever that truth is, right? Sometimes, like, I've worked with people that work in e-commerce agencies, and the reality is they all sound the same. We're the best at these ads and these ads. So this person's pitch changed to, I do e-commerce. We all sound the same. I know you're already, you know, and there's nothing I can say that, you know, will get you to believe that we're super unique and not, because we're not. There's nothing unique about this. So here's where we focus. We focus on blank, blank, and blank. And here's how you know that we were delivering those values. And so I'm speaking as this person now. I want to work with people where they find those values to be really important. Are those important to you? Right? And then all of a sudden, this whole thing, everyone's so nervous around differentiating and being unique and different. But then when the truth is revealed, of like, we all say that and it all sounds the same. And actually, this is our lane. Like, we focus in this industry and we have support that means this, like we respond within this and we do this. And we're looking at people that really value those things. Then all of a sudden, the belief goes through the roof. The truth goes through the roof. Their clients are like, wow, finally someone who's addressing the elephant in the room, that everyone sounds the same within this sector. And what I see is all that's happening is that they're becoming really clear on what they believe, and they're becoming really clear on what's true out there, and they're naming that truth. They're saying it up front. Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And it's hard. Like, you were asking a little bit about Sales Huddle. I mean, like, that's, I think, the thing that's really fun and interesting about Sales Huddle is it's like hard to get to it's hard to hear the truth sometimes. I don't think it was easy for that person to come to the realization, their own felt experience of that realization, that they were saying things they didn't believe. And it's also true.
Yeah.
So which world do we want to live in? Because I think that person's future is much more clear now that they're like, wow, this is what it feels like to say what's not being true. And this is how well it worked out for me. Huh.
So how big are each of the huddles, right? Because I see a world where there's a number. I don't know what the number is, but there's a number where there's too many people in a room to have that conversation.
Huddle's 5 people.
5
people. There are really specific, each one's an hour, starts on time, ends on time. There are very specific group agreements. For example, one is like discourse and disagreement without judgment. So people can disagree to their heart's content. And the second someone says, like, that's stupid, I'll cut them off and I'll be like, nope. Because stupidity also doesn't objectively exist, right?
Right.
We can say like, oh, I heard what Joe said and I wouldn't do that. The other is like, there's no teaching, there's no training, there's no offering of any unsolicited advice. Everything is happening because someone's showing up and they're asking for what they need help with. And that by itself will change the discourse of the situation. And that doesn't mean, just like when dealing with a customer, that doesn't mean that everyone's forthright or aware of what their core issue is. Sometimes they come with this and the issue is over here. And it's our job as a group of people to get to the bit. Like, what's the root issue here?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of situations like, oh, I need help closing this thing before the month of the quarter. And it's like, why? Oh, because my commission. So what? Customer doesn't care about your commission. Is you doing this helping them? No. Why are you doing it? Are you going to get a divorce if you don't get this? Is your boss going to fire you? Yes, my boss might fire me. Great. That's the root right there. It's not about closing this person before the end of the month. Right? Like that. And sometimes that needs like a fresh perspective. And sometimes I think the fact that folks are strangers within huddles, but really want to help each other actually helps, because there can be a directness of like, I'm asking you this because I want to know, and there's no consequence on me.
I almost feel like this should be called sales therapy, no?
You know, people, I've heard people use that, and I used to be so resistant to it because I think that I have this own judgment that like therapy is for people that don't know what they're doing to like figure it out. But because Sales Huddle is very much for like experienced salespeople that want to be their best. But when we talk about being their best, it's about much more than what does the email say. Like, it's like, we have to get into what the meat is of the situation. I would say this. I would say it's not therapy, but it is therapeutic.
Yeah.
Because there's something that happens. There's a release that I can feel in people sometimes when they leave a huddle. They're like, wow, I feel like I can see clearly what's in front of me. Like, I thought it was this email thing, but it was this. Or I thought it was closing this, but it was actually, here's another example from last week. That closing one really happened. I thought it was this closing one, but what I really realized it was that I skipped a step in my sales process. I thought I had it in the bag, and then they told me they were comparing other people, and I forgot to ask these two questions. I'm like, great, that makes sense that you're angry at yourself. I would be too. Lesson here, don't skip steps. Yeah. But don't try to take it out on this person of trying to bug them and get them to close her because you skip steps. That's not what's happening here.
Yeah. I feel like the act of, you know, we do so many things as salespeople in a day and in a week, and it's you're prospecting, you're demoing, you're following up, you're doing this, you're updating Salesforce. And, you know, there's not a lot of time built in to like take a step back and say, well, why is this happening? Why am I not hitting my number? Why is this deal stalling? Why is this person not responding to me? So on and so forth. And I just think having a forum, having a time to, one, ask that question yourself, and two, ask it to someone else that is not in that mix with you, right, is really helpful. Like it helps you to uncover blind spots, right? And so I think Sales Huddle, it seems like an amazing approach for that. I think, you know, if you have some sort of like a coach, if you have friends, like just the act, I think, of going through that is something that we don't do enough. And we spend so much time doing that you're almost like a worker bee that's just going. And that if you don't take the step back to reflect and try to understand why things are the way they are, it's not going to get better. It's not going to get fixed because you're just doing the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah. And it's not Sales Huddle. It's not like Sales Huddle is the only place to do this. There's so many ways to get to this sort of thing. And I think you're hitting it on it really beautifully, which is we're doing all these things. And the question is the why underneath. Like that's the most important thing of like the why underneath and what's really, we can say that whether there's a challenge or what sales actually is. Like sometimes I've been prepping for this talk, And it's literally going to be me asking a series of questions, just talking about it. Like, what is sales? How do you know when you're selling well? How do you know when you're not selling well? Like that basic, because those things are at the foundation, right? Like really understanding, like, here's how I know when I'm selling well. Here's how I know when I'm not. How do I know when I'm not being trustworthy? How do I know when I'm being clear and consistent? What a great piece of advice I had once was, know when you're a leader, know when you're a peer, and know when you're a follower, and do your job really well. If you're in a follow position, be the best. Like being a student, be the best student. When you're in a lead position, when you're the coach, when you're the teacher, be the best. And know the difference and play your role really well. And I see this essence of what's happening here play out in sales. I'll give you an example. I was in a sales huddle. Someone comes in and they're like, man, this discovery call went all out of whack. And I said, oh, why? What happened? I said, well, we started it and I asked the person what they wanted to do. And then, it just went crazy from there. And I said, got it. So let me give you an analogy. You go to hike Mount Everest and you decide to pick it. You're trying to get to somewhere you can't get by yourself, right? That's a key thing that happens within sales. And you selected a person that you want to get you up Mount Everest, right? Someone that you trust more than yourself, right? Going back to that analogy. Let's say you show up on day one and the person says, great, Joe, what do you want to do today? How would you feel? And they said, I would feel incredibly like not sure, unsafe. Like I'm asking you to tell me what to do. That's why I hired you. That's why I'm talking with you. So, and I was like, great, that's at level 10 because your life is at line, but that's what that customer feels with you right now. They feel like they're being dropped. You're not guiding them. You're not helping them. You're not using your competence to serve them. And they were like, wow, I never saw it that way before. I was like, great, well, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And it
love it.
It doesn't mean not taking their input, right? If a guide is bringing people up Mount Everest, he knows where they need to go. But you know what he also knows is all the people that he's bringing up or they're bringing up and what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And he's definitely considering all of them in everything that he does. And he's also the one that's setting like, here's where we're going. And sometimes that means a gentle, like we're not going over there. And sometimes, and I won't swear, but sometimes that means like, do not step over that fucking crack or you will die. If you get within 10 feet of that, like you're not eating tomorrow. But why is he setting that line? We talked about this at the beginning of the interview. Why is he saying that line? Because he knows that if they step there, they will die. And so he's being firm with them to help them, not to make himself feel better that he has that power. Right. And that's, I think, a similar thing in sales is like when you're going to a customer and you're saying like, you need to do this by this date. The question is that coming from a place of that's the best thing for the customer, or I feel slighted by them and I want to make myself feel more powerful. So I'm going to make them jump through a hoop.
Yeah.
There's a difference and they'll feel it. Yeah. And so I think that's like the hard, yeah, that's just the fun and hard part of sales is like that nuance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just it's a world full of those nuances that you're trying to balance and you're trying to ebb and flow and be on the right side of. And again, I think a community like the one that you're building can be super helpful to help us take that step back and help us understand the blind spots. I know we're getting close on time. I've got one last question for you, and then we'll wrap up and we could show people where to connect with you. But is there a book or books that you recommend to people that you find yourself rereading that changed your life, that you gift to people, anything like that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's 3 of them. The first is A Long Walk to Freedom.
Mandela.
You want to get the felt experience of what it's like for someone that's very clear in their purpose and will never break that integrity. That's that. Right? Like, here's the purpose. Here's how I'm honest with it. Here's how I'm in integrity with this. And I think that's a lot of sales. That's most sales. The second, there's a book, Endurance, about Shackleton. Have you ever heard of this book?
Yeah, I read it last year. So good.
Yep. So another great book, again, about leadership and everything that is about, because leadership is fundamentally about, sales is fundamentally about leadership, about that difference between the buyer and the seller. There's another book, I think it's the 4 Pillars of Trust. Oh, the Code of Trust. It's written by the Code of Trust. So it's written by Robin Dreeke, and he headed up counterintelligence for the FBI in the late 90s. And so the thesis of his book is basically like, okay, so my job is to get people that don't want to give me information to freely and willingly give me information. Well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so it's about building trust. Like, how is trust actually built? And again, it's not directly related to sales, and everything in that book is about sales, or will affect sales. And that book really kind of like changed my life, because I started to see things from like, oh, well, why should somebody trust me? Just start there. Why should someone believe me? Can I actually help anybody? Right? Like, I believe that, you know, there are answers to those, and it's really, I found it really useful in my life to become really specific about when those are, and honest with myself. So yeah, those would be the 3 books rather that have had a large effect on me, and like how I am and how I sell.
That's great. Chris, I know we're getting back for time. Before I let you go, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will want to connect with you following the show, learn more about you, maybe ask you some questions, maybe learn more about Sales Huddle. What's the best place for folks to find you?
The Sales Huddle website is joinsaleshuddle.com, and folks can find me on LinkedIn. I believe my URL is Topher Williams. So it's linkedin.com/IN that LinkedIn does, and then Topher Williams. And yeah, I love to talk with people. I love it when people want to join Sales Huddle. I love it when people don't want to join Sales Huddle. And I love like helping people out and listening, and I just love salespeople too. It's like the spirit of sales is just like so cool and fun. And most of the things that I think I want to have happen in the world, and I notice other people do too, really the bottleneck of them is sales. It's like building trust, building momentum to get folks to adopt something. And that's the thing I think is it gets me most excited about sales, is that it's about building trust with people and helping people find a path to get something that they themselves want to get to, that serves them better, that their life is better off for doing that. So yeah, that's why I just love talking about salespeople in general. And then
I love it.
Open to, if anyone has any questions about things I said or wants me to clarify, or completely disagrees with what I said, or I said something that makes you super angry, I'd love to hear that too. I've had that as well. And yeah.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, 100%. And I've had some of my best relationships start, both personally and professionally, speaking of honesty, where, you know, I'm saying something and someone finally is like, you know what, Chris, like, I think you're a real asshole. And I'm like, and I'll respond and be like, you know, I appreciate your honesty, the courage it took to say that. I can imagine it's not true, and I'd love to hear why. And they're so struck by like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, I want to hear like your experience of why you feel like I'm doing this. Like, maybe there's something we can shift. And I've had so many great professional collaborations and friends start from that place of like, someone's really has this feeling that they don't want to share with me. And then when they share it and it's received, and it's like, yeah, great. Let's, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about you. I want to address this. Yeah.
That's awesome. Chris, I love it. I don't hate you from the conversation. Nothing pissed me off, but People, feel free to hit him up. Chris, I appreciate you being so generous with your time and your insights this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
All right. Thanks for checking out that episode. Happy April, happy Q2 to everyone out there that's getting after it. Again, this podcast was brought to you by gong.io and postal.io. So great way to support me is to support our sponsors. Again, if you leave a review on Apple, I will send you a free Starbucks gift card, courtesy of Postal. So shout out to the sponsors. Shout out to the guests today. Enjoy your day. Let's get after it. See you next time. Peace.